here at Yahoo. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle of Establish the Run. And as I like to do at the top of the show, I typically begin by answering something that I think is of impact going into the week. As your questions continue to build, we don't have to do start sits, but I know that's what everyone likes to talk about on Friday, even though we have another 48 hours to actually make those decisions, so they're not crucial on a Friday. But nonetheless, we'll get to all those questions. And let's begin with the Jaguars situation, because after Travis Hunter had a non-contact knee injury this past week in practice, put on injured reserve for at least the next 4 games, he is droppable. You just get rid of him, because obviously now he's going to be out at least through week 13. And in the fantasy playoffs, you can't even start him in his first game back from injury because we have no idea about his usage and ramp-up period. Not to mention a non-contact IR injury is always ominous and telling. So I'm easily just getting rid of Travis Hunter. And not that I'm necessarily going to Parker Washington. It depends on your waiver wire. It's all relative. You're not really looking for the direct replacement for Travis Hunter if there are better options available. You're still trying to pick up the best players for your roster. But in the interim, the backup is Parker Washington. So for deeper leagues, someone you can go ahead and add if he's the best available player out there. For Washington, it's very clearly him over Dyami Brown, just because since Brown has come back in the last 3 games, and him and Washington have played intermittently without Brenton Strange, Washington has not only ran more routes, he's also been effective. He leads Brian Thomas in yards per route run in that time. He leads the entire team, Brian Thomas included, in receiving yards in that time. And Parker Washington has also leads the team in being targeted on 24% of his routes, more than Brian Thomas's 21% target per route run rate. He's just a guy who, when he's out there, he's the one earning targets. And so now, since we are projecting him to play more, if not mirror Brian Thomas in 2 wide receiver sets, that's a player we do want, again, relative to your waiver wire. He's not a better pickup than Kyle Monangai for this week, for example. You wouldn't start him over Kareem Hunt against a horrible Bills rushing defense. But in terms of a wide receiver who could be out there, who could be startable if you're desperate, sure. Parker Washington is a good pickup, and he is the replacement for Travis Hunter for the rest of the season. The Dark Plumber asked to begin our Q&A session an impossible answer, an impossible question, because the question is Tyrone Tracy or Kyle Monangai, and it's 2 top 12 backs, right? There is no right or wrong answer because they're both amazing plays, and we're dissecting marginal points, so you're happy starting either, and who cares what happens? Just let the process go where it may. If I had to choose one, I am choosing Monangai over Tracy, because it's not just that DeAndre Swift got ruled out. It does seem like Roschon Johnson is also trending towards being out as well. So Monangai should handle every single touch against a Bengals defense, allowing 5 more points per game to opposing running backs than any other defense in the league. So again, there is no wrong answer. Just let the chips fall where they may. But if you have put yourself in this situation because you have too many good players, I would start Monangai over Tyrone Tracy. Tracy, who's also in an amazing spot, not only entrusted last week once Cam Scatterboo was injured, since he out-touched Devin Singletary 8-3 once Scatterboo left that game, but also just go back to last year when Tracy was a 5th-round rookie, and this coaching staff, the same coaching staff, still entrusted him for 71% of the team's backfield touches from October on. And regardless of what he does on the ground, and it is a great matchup against the 49ers front 7 that continues losing pieces and leaking fantasy points to running backs. But regardless of his rushing success, which I do expect him to have success, he also has a tremendous out in that the Seahawks and 49ers are the only defenses allowing over 7 targets per game to opposing running backs. So I would start Monangai personally, but you can't go wrong either way. And if Tracy outscored Monangai, it wouldn't be shocking at all because they're both good starts. Lisa B asked, do you think a quarterback change will benefit Kamara, and is he even a hold rest of season? He's definitely a hold just because there are still so fewer places to go. This is why the last 2 games without Kendry Miller, Alvin Kamara's share of the team's running back carries. Now, I should mention, although he's getting more carries or a higher share of the team's carries, the issue is they're a bad team. And so when they're not playing in favorable game scripts to run the ball, which is basically never, then obviously it's going to eliminate Kamara from the game script. Not only that, but at this stage of his career, he's averaging a career low in yards per carry and a career low in yards per touch. He's just super inefficient. And so it takes a heaping of touches, which he's still not getting because Devin Neal, although not getting a carry last week in place of Kendry Miller, still got 3 targets and matched Kamara and routes run. So I think as a whole, just because if Devin Neal were injured, then we are talking about a player in Kamara who gets every single touch. You're just not expecting any amount of efficiency whatsoever. And as a player, you're probably not even leaning towards starting. Like if you had Modern Guy and Tracy, you would start them easily over Kamara because you're not expecting much from him. But I'm also not expecting the quarterback to change to benefit anyone really either. I think best case scenario and what I'm expecting to happen is it to be a neutral and a lateral change where nothing changes actually in the passing of the torch from Spencer Rattler to Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck's red flag coming out of college that also he was horrible under pressure. He comes off the bench last week. He throws 30 passes in the second half as they continue to lean towards a pass-heavier game script. That's just what Kellen Moore is going to do. That's how the offense is going to operate. And the good news is for Chris Olave is that he has had a higher rate of his targets 10 yards downfield the past 2 games as they've changed his route tree. And that's kind of what we needed from Olave for him to reach his ceiling, is to be used downfield more as opposed to only those shallow routes where the double-digit targets were cool, but he was never going to have over 100 yards. He was never going to break out on just those shallow targets. He needed to start being used these past 3 games more downfield than he has been. But for Shuck, the red flag was if the pocket crumbles, he can't do anything. And he comes off the bench last week. He goes 1 for 7 for 6 yards under pressure. Now gets Jared Verse in the Rams defense that is top 10 in pressure rate. So in the immediate future, no, not expecting much from anyone for the Saints. Tyler Shuck, not the answer long term, but he was picked in the 2nd round. They have to see this thing through, so they'll let him develop for the rest of the year, seeing if he's a career backup before they go into the offseason, and the Saints are easily pick a quarterback in the top 5 picks. Lisa B asks, is Higgins startable if Flacco plays? No, because, I mean, startable is all relative. Again, like I'm in a 14-team league where I'm going to start him no matter what, just because my options on my bench are not better. But like, do you want to start Higgins if Jake Browning's under center? No, because we already did that for 3 games and it was useless. You can start Jamar Chase for the targets, but you're also not expecting much from Jamar Chase if Jake Browning starts. Again, as we already saw for 3 games this year. So you can look elsewhere. But in terms of like the replacement value for T. Higgins, if it is Jake Browning under center, like T. Higgins or Parker Washington, for example, you go to the waiver wire, look for a better answer, you'd still start T. Higgins easily. Now, if someone like Alec Pierce in a better matchup with a higher team total is out there, I would personally start Alec Pierce over T. Higgins for sure, because you're expecting more targets, more efficient targets, and it's the best possible matchup possible for Pierce downfield against that horrendous Steelers defense, one of the absolute worst in the league. But again, when you talk about starting T. Higgins or not with Jake Browning, it comes down to replacement value, and that's just going to vary from roster to roster. Let's see here. Another Lisa B question. I had to let go of, I'm assuming she means Rachaad White and Aaron Jones because of buys. Should I attempt to get them back? And is Reed worth the hold in injured reserve? I'm not sure if Reed's worth the hold or not. There's so many different players on IR this year that, again, Reed being holdable is relative. He might come back in the last month of the season, but I'm not sure. And it's to the point where I'm not sure enough that I don't mind dropping them if forced to. For Rachaad White and Sean Tucker, I'm trying to hold both just because we still don't have a single update on Bucky Irving returning after the bye. We're all operating under that assumption. And we've all been saying they're just waiting for the bye week. but we literally don't have a single hard report that he is going to return or that he's close to returning. We haven't heard anything. The only update we have is that for a Sunday game, he was ruled out on Monday. So I am still very worried about Bucky Irving, honestly, right now. So much so that in deeper leagues, I picked up Sean Tucker everywhere, just waiting to see for next week if Bucky Irving's even available. Because in this past game, before this past game against the Saints, the Bucs coaching staff did mention that they want to move forward in playing Sean Tucker more, and they lived up to that notion in allowing Tucker to have 12 carries to Rachaad White's 13. Basically a timeshare moving forward. And Sean Tucker was more efficient on his goal line carries as well. So we could be looking at a timeshare where Tucker is actually the goal line back, so he has more upside than Rachaad White as well. Similar to the Seahawks backfield, where Charbonnet has more upside, but it's a timeshare, and you ideally don't want to start either player, but a lot of the times we're forced to. So I'm stashing Tucker wherever I need a running back over the bye week. I'm keeping Rachaad White wherever I can over the bye week, just because there's no guarantee Bucky Irving returns until someone mentions something. Because Todd Bowles even said they're going to practice on Monday and go from there, which says nothing. We have no idea. Kincaid or Hunter Henry, again, nitpicking, but I go Hunter Henry from Drake May in particular. Let's look at the tight end stats here. The Chiefs, for example, are just third. They're allowing the third fewest tight end targets per game. I'm expecting a heavy dose of Josh Allen because, as we've seen, he's averaged double-digit carries against the Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defense. Whenever the Bills play the Chiefs, it's all Josh Allen. That's when it's hero ball. And they know that. Otherwise, in any other game, you can toil around, give, James Cook a lot of carries, Ray Davis a couple touches, mix in your wide receivers. But against the Chiefs in the Buffalo Super Bowl every year, it's always Josh Allen, and it's all Josh Allen, no one else. So I'm starting Hunter Henry, a great matchup for Drake May too, by the way. Like, the Falcons defense has looked good the past couple of games, but that's because Josh Allen this year has been terrible against the blitz, and the Falcons blitzed him on 60% of his dropbacks. Mac Jones has averaged 5.3 yards per attempt against the blitz this year. He's been horrible. The Falcons blitzed him on 54% of his dropbacks, but Drake May is not that. Drake May has been one of the absolute best quarterbacks in the entire league against the blitz this year, including 8.7 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns and no picks, second in passing success rate, and fourth in EPA per dropback. So expecting a very big day, as every week, for Drake May, but in particular this week against this Falcons defense that's going to send the house, and they're going to fail in doing that for sure. Doug W. asked, Woody Marks or Charbonnet? And with expecting Marks, who was questionable but expected to play, expecting Marks to still lead Nick Chubb in touches every week, but as he did last week as well. It is a tougher matchup, though, even without Pat Surtain against this Broncos defense. Having said that, you have more pass-catching upside with Woody Marks. When we're splitting hairs, that's what I always look at, given that the Seahawks have the lowest running back target share in the entire league. Sam Darnold just doesn't pass to running backs. And so I'll take Woody Marks and take the pass-catching easily over Charbonnet. Let's see here. Darnold or Lawrence, and that is easily Sam Darnold, high floor QB2. Trevor Lawrence also has just horrible splits against zone coverage, which the Raiders lead the league in, which makes sense because they are bereft of talent in their secondary. So they have no choice but to drop all their players back and defend in windows as opposed to defending man on man, which is why they lead the league in zone coverage. But Trevor Lawrence against zone coverage this year, because he can't just drop back and throw a prayer into one-on-one coverage. He has to actually diagnose windows on the field. He's been miserable. A league worst 59% completion rate for 6.1 yards per attempt, 34th among quarterbacks. against zone coverage this year. So pretty awful spot for Trevor Lawrence. So quite easily Sam Darnold, who gets the benefit of the doubt as a high floor QB2, given that the Seahawks have a 25.5 point team total that matches Buffalo and like an offense that everyone's trying to play against the Chiefs, Buffalo, but it also matches Arizona, who is playing the worst defense in the entire league on Monday night against the Cowboys. So I think that tells you what Vegas at least believes the Seahawks are going to put up with ease in points. It's a cross-country road game for Seattle, but remember, they had the bye week, whereas Washington played on Monday night in a short week without Terry McLaurin, too. Kevin Landers. Who do you think Pickens for Olave and Vidal benefits long-term? It just depends. I mean, personally, I think Olave and Vidal are better. That's the side I prefer in this kind of trade because Amari Hampton last week was still in a boot. The earliest he returns is week 13, we've been told, reportedly. Earliest. We also don't even know if he returns to being an every down back again. I personally think so because they have the first round draft capital sunk into him when Kamani Vidal was a player they didn't even care to give touches to last year. Whenever both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards is injured, they just kind of overlooked Kamani Vidal entirely. But we're talking about week 13 at the earliest, so you have Vidal as an every touch running back until then. Not to mention Olave is the Saints wide receiver 1, so it's Olave and Vidal for me. But you probably did that deal because you're not starting Vidal. You have better running backs, which it makes sense. I always go for win-win trades. This just seems like that. George Pickens has been perfectly fine too. You know, in the past, whenever CeeDee Lamb was out, it was, well, before CeeDee Lamb got injured, I should say, Jake Ferguson was the Cowboys wide receiver 2, basically, behind CeeDee Lamb. But since then, since CeeDee Lamb returned, it's instead been George Pickens who's been used as their wide receiver 2, probably because Dak had time to build a better rapport with him. George Pickens obviously led the league in receiving yards whenever CeeDee Lamb missed time. And so they just built better chemistry. And now Pickens has been peppered since Lamb has been back. Lamb, 18 targets. Pickens, 15 targets in that time. Jake Ferguson scoring touchdowns, but the last 2 games, only 8 targets. So that's really concerning for Jake Ferguson, who's definitely a sell high player. Jake Ferguson or Chase Brown this week. Yeah, Chase Brown's also the easiest sell high in fantasy football right now, just because the first month of the season, for example, Chase Brown out-touched the rest of the Bengals running back 68-12. They weren't using anyone else. But these last 3 weeks now with Joe Flacco, it has been a timeshare. Chase Brown's only handled 60% of the team's backfield touches. It just looks better because he had that game where he had a career high 9.5 yards per carry, not sustainable, obviously, against that horrible Steelers defense. And then last week scored 2 touchdowns. But I'm personally leveraging those 2 touchdowns and selling him because he's in a timeshare. It's 60-40 with Samaje Perine. Chase Brown's not even the every touch RB2. You could at least hold your nose and start and hope for efficiency. Now it's the timeshare, and he's been efficient in that timeshare. But that's still concerning because then when he's not efficient, it's just a timeshare, and you're stuck with him mirroring Perine with touches. So I'm definitely trying to trade Chase Brown personally, but I'm going to take those touches over Jake Ferguson this week. A better roster pickup, Kimray DK or Jameson Williams, and it's still Jameson Williams. I'm not even putting those in the same tier at all. DK is fine. Calvin Ridley's going to miss again, and DK is getting shallower targets than Elik Iomanor, so that's why he's like slowly developing. DK was also a 97 percentile athlete. Like, he was a really good athlete, but we're also still talking about the sustainability of targets from Cam Ward in one of the league's worst offenses with the Titans, and it's just not really something you can depend on week to week. Whereas Jameson Williams has not been dependable, But we've also seen spots to start him in shootouts, including this upcoming game with the Lions back at home against a Vikings defense that actually, in tougher competition, they've been horrible. So I'm expecting Jameson Williams to once again have a very good day. I'm starting him in a lot of deeper 12-team, 14-team leagues. I just don't think DK's even in the same range as JMO. DK the rookie, not DK Metcalf. Need to start 3 between James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, or Monangai. I'm easily sitting Chase Brown. Monangai is a top 12 play, given that he's the only running back in the best spot possible for the Bears against the Bengals. And then you're not benching James Cook or Josh Jacobs. That's an easy question. Brett Smith asks Monangai or Dobbins this week. Very easy question as well. It's Monangai. Not even going to worry about a timeshare with Dobbins. Also, Dobbins, everyone gets the post-Cowboys bump. So now Troy Franklin looks great on the waiver wire. J.K. Dobbins went for over 100 yards. R.J. Harvey, his usage didn't change at all. He only handled 30% of the backfield touches. He just scored 3 touchdowns on 7 touches. But we always come out of Cowboys games thinking that offense is better, but they're not better. We were even all gathered here last week. We had so many questions about Bo Nix or this. And it was just, the answer was always Bo Nix and the Broncos because they're playing the Cowboys. It's that easy. Whereas now, the past 2 weeks, Bo Nix has had it simple, and we started him against the Giants and Cowboys. You're not starting him against the Texans defense. Like the Broncos now, you could go back to ignoring them outside of Cortland Sutton. Keep on stashing R.J. Harvey for sure, but when you have an option like Monangai, a top 12 running back, or J.K. Dobbins, it's easily Monangai. Just because the Broncos are no longer in a layup, a cupcake matchup like the Giants and Cowboys were. And we've seen Bo Nix be horrendous under pressure this year, which the Texans are going to bring. Offer Justin Jefferson and Kyren Williams for Bijan. It's a win-win. Like, I'm assuming you're trading Justin Jefferson, right? Because you have wide receiver depth. And so although Justin Jefferson's a top 12 wide receiver, you were saying like, oh, I had CeeDee Lamb and I got Rashee Rice back. So I can afford to trade one of these guys to get an RB1. You don't have your roster listed here, Chris, but I'm assuming that's what it means. That's usually what most of these kind of trades mean. And so it's win-win. The other person is getting Justin Jefferson and Kyren Williams, and we'll start them every single week. You're getting Bijan Robinson, and we'll start him every single week, even though it's a miserable matchup against the Patriots defense that, like the Chiefs, have played murderer's row at running back, and they haven't leaked anything at all. No running back production whatsoever. But at least Bijan is still leading his position and route rate. Well, Christian McCaffrey and Bijan are top 2 in route participation, so you have outs as a pass catcher for Bijan. But it's a win-win trade. For defense, you list a lot of them. I mean, you just go with the highest ranking easily. I'm not even going to read off all the defenses since they're all so flimsy and you're just streaming. But among all these, the Raiders are the best play. Giants basically have no defense. You'll never play the Bills against a Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs offense that is firing on all cylinders. A top 5 quarterback 2 weeks ago, whenever he only played the first half, that's it. Last week comes back out, averages 12 yards per attempt. You would never, Buffalo's defense isn't even good, first of all, but you would never play the Bills against, or any defense, against what is honestly like the best Patrick Mahomes offense we've seen probably for his entire career. Like he is at that level right now. Plus Atlanta against Drake May, we talked about it. You're never going to play the Saints defense against the Rams. And then Cowboys have no defense. So quite easily, it's the Raiders for the matchups, Doug, I mentioned earlier, and how at least they're advantageous. Trevor Lawrence has not been a good quarterback anyways, but given the splits I mentioned about zone coverage, I think the Raiders are a sneaky streamer. But sneaky, as in like the Rams are obviously the best play. Then their Lions are a really good play against J.J. McCarthy. Ravens were a great play last night. But deeper leagues where everyone stashes defenses, Raiders are probably out there because no one wants to play them, and I think they're a good play. Kevin Landers asked, Zonovan Knight or Monangai as a start this week? Again, a situation where you can't win because they're both great plays and you're probably going to make the wrong decision. And when I'm in these situations, I don't even care. Like I personally just like do the process. I start the one I think is best. And if the other person outscores them, whatever, who cares? Because they're both, we put ourselves in this position to have 2 top 12 plays. And that's a good position to be in because you just can't lose with the selection. So I'm going to start Monangai over Bam Knight, but both amazing plays. The Cardinals think so little of Michael Carter. They waived him on Monday, understanding no team, 31 other teams don't care about Michael Carter, and they're just going to let him go back to their practice squad. And that's what happened. No team claimed Michael Carter at all. So that means Michael Carter is just taking up space, and I'm happy for him. He's getting paid, but the Cardinals don't care. They're not going to use him. It's going to be all Zonovan Knight against the same spot where J.K. Dobbins goes over 100 yards. R.J. Harvey gets 3 touchdowns on 7 touches. It's Zonovan Knight's turn. So he's an amazing start. I'm going to take Monangai, though, and again, you can't win with that selection. You can't lose, but you can't win because they're both great plays. Denver or Seattle this week. I'm going to play Denver. CJ Stroud has only been good. The Texans offense, I should say, has only been good when they've played defenses that were missing every single player, last week with the 49ers included. Even with Surtain, though, if you go back to last year, they've only allowed 6.5 yards per attempt through the air. They've still been under Sean Payton and why does the Broncos DC escape me? Elijah Avero. They've still been an elite defense without Surtain on the field. And now they get like a layup against Nick Caley and the Texans defense. So it's still going to be Denver. Deesh, Uncle Ted asked, how do you know Tyler Shuck is trash? I didn't say he was trash at all. I said he's trash under pressure because he was in college and he was last week and came off the bench. He was also not even valued. It's like Kadarius Toney, right? Kadarius Toney was a first round, or Matthew Golden, let's say. Kadarius Toney was a first round pick, but no one wanted Kadarius Toney except the Giants, which was Joe Judge at the time, and the Jaguars, who were Urban Meyer, 2 of the worst NFL coaches of all time. So it's like Kadarius Toney was a first round pick, but was he? Do we actually consider him when you're only coveted by Joe Judge and Urban Meyer? Same thing for Tyler Shuck. He was only coveted by the Saints in the second round because he's a pocket sloth. He doesn't move. He's not mobile. And again, in college, as a longtime player who, again, backed up Justin Herbert with Oregon because he's been in the league so long, a 7-year collegiate pro, was awful under pressure. So, again, I didn't say he was trash at all. I said it's a neutral. I think it's a neutral move. But for fantasy, given that he doesn't add anything with his legs, and we know that, you would never, ever start him, ever. And you would start the Rams defense easily against him. Since, again, we have evidence that he's horrible under pressure. Deesh asked, 2 running backs and 1 flex. Lots of contingency options. Lots of just committee players you're asking about. So let's see here. Woody Marks, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Travion Henderson, Kareem Hunt, Juwan Jennings. I would go Travion Henderson and Kareem Hunt and Juwan Jennings. And I just bench the committees. I'd bench Woody and I'd bench Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. We know Kenneth Walker and being out carried 8-2 inside the 5-yard line. And we know that he has to score his touchdown from outside the red zone. It has to be a big run. And he's capable of that. I just don't ever want to start that player when I don't have to. And you don't have to. You have Kareem Hunt here against one of the league's worst rush defenses. The Bills still allowing the highest rate of 15-yard runs of explosive runs on the season. Kareem Hunt also is the only running back, Isaiah Pacheco included, to touch the ball inside the 5-yard line. He has 3 touchdown upside in his range of outcomes in this game. You take that easily for, again, the best offense in the league with the Chiefs, and then you trade Travion Henderson with Ramondre Stevenson ruled out. Wide range of outcomes, by the way, for Travion Henderson. 7 carries for nothing. 7 carries for 13 yards. Could happen, sure. And they could just lean on Terrell Jennings instead. But this is a situation where they're going to have to prove me wrong because even against one of, if not the best run defense in the league, the Browns front 7, Travion Henderson just showed what he can do with a season best 7.5 yards per carry on 10 carries. So not even a small sample. The Patriots will have to prove me wrong with Travion Henderson this week, who I'm going to start as a top 24 back. If you have Monangai, Tyrone Tracy, you start them over Travion Henderson, understanding that at least we know Monagai and Tracy, Kareem Hunt, they'll get touches, whereas we can't guarantee that. We think so, but we can't guarantee that for Travion Henderson. But otherwise, like in other relative spots where it's like nitpicking, again, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, I'm just not starting a committee over Travion Henderson. There's no way. I'm gonna make the Patriots prove me wrong. All right, 8-team league. Travis Etienne and Olave for Quinshon Judkins. Judkins, of course, went into the bye week with a shoulder injury. We don't know if he's healthy. Let's start there, which is why Dylan Sampson was an option on the waiver wire. I wrote about it. And I established the run, given his 67% share of the team's touches and 19% target share in week 1 without Judkins. That's who they lean on to be an every down back when Judkins is not healthy, potentially even in week 10 when the Browns return from their bye. I think you are giving up. So basically, this is a wide receiver for a running back trade, right? Because like Etienne, you can plug in, but there is the potential after Liam Cohen mentioned, he said this about Travis Hunter, who is now out for the year, pretty much unofficially, but we're treating him as out for the year. But he said that after the bye, when he was asked about Travis Hunter's usage, the best 11 players are going to play for the Jaguars after the bye. They're just going to put the best players out there. That could also mean that Bashal Tutin is also going to be in a committee or just out carry Travis Etienne. I'm not projecting that. I'm not predicting that. I'm not telling you that's going to happen. I'm just saying that is possible, and it would not be shocking at all if Bashal Tutin was like the number 1 pickup on waiver wires next week, because they come out of the bye and they say, this is our most explosive player, after Etienne in 2 of his last 3 games has averaged less than 4 yards per carry and continues to dwindle down as the season goes along. So, Etienne, short-term filler, but are we talking about a committee or just getting overthrown rest of season since we're only halfway through the year? There's a lot of football left to play. Yeah. So this deal is basically Olave and 2 weeks of Etienne, I would say, for Quinshon Judkins. And if you need a running back, sure, it's fine. I'd prefer the Etienne and Olave side personally, though, but I get it. Brian Thomas Jr. or Charbonnet? That's Brian Thomas Jr., especially without Travis Hunter. We at least know, may not matter, but we know that Brian Thomas is going to lead the Jaguars in routes run. He's still a top 12, fringe top 12 wide receiver, where Charbonnet's not that at his own position. So we're easily going BTJ here. RJ Plus, stacked at wide receiver. Lots of good guys. Drake London for a top 10 RB. Yes. So we've seen now with Darnell Mooney, 3 games that Darnell Mooney played, Drake London has a 24.5% target share. And 3 games that Mooney was either injured or inactive, he has a 41% target share with Michael Penix. Quite literally, they do not change Drake London's usage whenever Mooney's on the field, and it's Mooney who basically matches him in targets. If not, like so far, the last 2 full games that Mooney played, he led the team in targets and he led the team in receiving yards. That's what he's doing. And so I think Drake London, whenever you are this stacked, for all those listening, not looking at the chat, RJ asked this question because he has Puka, Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Drake London. When you're that stacked, you would never start Drake London ever, literally ever, over Puka, Rice, and Amon-Ra. So you just easily trade him, easily. Jonathan Mawini asked the same question I answered earlier. That's you, Bam Knight or Kyle Monagai. I said Monagai. A Racer Mister, let's say. Tet or Brian Thomas Jr. That's a much closer one. With Bryce Young back, I think. I think I'd go Tetaroa. We're expecting the target share to be higher. A sneakier environment as well. Not only for the Panthers just to get like destroyed by the Packers. So we're expecting volume and negative game script for Carolina. But like in the changing of the guard to finally, we believe anyways, based on how the Panthers coaching staff was acting about Chuba Hubbard, we think that they're finally going to do the right thing and try to win and give Rico Dowdle more touches as opposed to wasting downs on Chuba Hubbard. And if that's the case, it could be sneaky because the Packers have shown you can easily beat them on the ground. They let you just win on the ground. So Rico Dowdle will probably have a big game, and that might be enough to keep the Panthers hanging around and make it competitive for Tetaroa. So I'll go Tetaroa over Brian Thomas Jr. since we're just nitpicking fringe wide receiver ones. Another trade. Would you trade Kittle and Ladd for Rashee? I would. It's a win-win trade. Someone trades Rashee Rice. I don't know why you would trade Rashee Rice, given that he's literally the wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game in the games he's played so far. But if someone wants to give up that, yeah, sure. George Kittle, tight end 1, Ladd McConkey, a wide receiver 1. It's just a win-win because that other person is probably, well, not probably, they are going to start George Kittle and Ladd McConkey every single week, and you can start Rashee Rice. So sure. Good deal. Kareem Hunt, Rico Dowdle, or Monangai. I think it's going to be Monangai, given that he's going to get every touch in the best matchup, I guess, outside of the Cowboys. Yeah, I'm going to say Monangai. Because at least we know his workload. We love Kareem Hunt's workload, but it's going to be Monangai. Let's see here. Nico or Kareem Hunt? We're going to go back to Nico Collins, especially if Pat Surtain doesn't play. Again, Kareem Hunt's fine, but I don't want to bench a guy that I have ranked as a fringe wide receiver 1 over Kareem Hunt, who we know has the touchdown upside, but we also know that Kareem Hunt has to score a touchdown to return value because he doesn't give you anything else between the 20s. Tony Quintus asked a bunch of, waiver wire start sets. So between Alec Pierce, Darius Slayton, PJ Washington, or Josh Downs, I'll personally go Alec Pierce. It's a great matchup for Pierce in particular. In this one, he led the Colts in routes run with Josh Downs back last week, still from 2 wide receiver sets. The Steelers have allowed the most yards per game to wide receiver 1s, and that's not to say Pierce is their wide receiver 1, but in terms of like production, Pierce can be their wide receiver 1. And he also leads the team with a 24% target share when Daniel Jones has been blitzed, and the Steelers are blitzing at the second highest rate in the league. So I really, really like Alec Pierce. The Colts have a 29-point team total, like just insane. They're going to put up points with ease on the Steelers because the Steelers are just horrendous on defense. So I like getting a piece of Alec Pierce this week for sure. Darius Slayton should be picked up everywhere, though. Darius Slayton is sneakily still the Giants wide receiver 1. In his previous 4 full starts without Malik Neighbors going back to last year, Darius Slayton led the Giants in receiving yards in all 4 games. And then this past week, he comes back from injury, and he also would have led them in receiving yards if his 60-yard touchdown didn't get negated for a ghost offensive pass interference. He didn't even touch the guy. It was a terrible call. They were battling downfield. But no, Darius Slayton is very clearly the Giants wide receiver 1. And the last 3 games against the Niners, like 2 of them, all you got to do is say Cam Johnson has 60 yards and touchdown. Who? Exactly. Cam Johnson. And Xavier Hutchinson last week, 60 yards and a touchdown. So I really like Darius Slayton this week too. But as I always say, it's all relative based on what you need. It's not like you go now and plug in Darius Slayton over Brian Thomas Jr. Flex, Tetaroa, Chase Brown, or Jalen Warren. That's going to be Tetaroa for me. The Colts have been terrific against running backs this year. Like, just look at Kamani Vidal, for example. Vidal rushed for 117 yards against the Vikings. No. 117 yards against the Dolphins. He rushes for 124 yards in 2 of his 3 starts against the Vikings. But the game in between that, he totaled 35 yards from scrimmage because that came against the Colts. And the Colts haven't allowed 80 rushing yards to any running back this year. So I think Jaylen Warren's a pretty easy sit wherever you can sit him. I know a lot of you can't. But where you can sit him, he has very limited ceiling in this game. This is a DK Metcalf game. This is not a Jaylen Warren game against the Colts front seven. Let's see here. Henderson or Zonovan Knight. That's closer. Both tremendous starts. I think I'd prefer to go Zonovan Knight. I think I go Zonovan Knight or Henderson. When I talked about Henderson earlier, and again, I said it was all relative based on the start sits you have. It's a better matchup for Knight, who also gets all the goal line work. So I think he's safer. I think you should go that route. But it's very, very close. Gibbs and Dowdle for James Cook and Bucky Irving. I would much rather have the Gibbs and Dowdle side, especially if Rico's about to be a top 24 running back again and get every touch. Even last week, like the public sentiment, the announcers were mentioning that Buffalo's short of their run defense. Buffalo didn't do a damn thing. Like they just got double-digit carries from Chuba Hubbard, who's averaged under 3 yards per carry in back-to-back games since he returned from injury. Rico Dowdle still averaged 6.5 yards per carry against the Bills defense. So no, I'd much prefer the Jahmyr Gibbs and Rico Dowdle side. Also, miserable matchup for James Cook. It's just like we talked about with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, how it was easily a sit last week. In managed leagues, you're never sitting James Cook, obviously, but he's not doing anything this week. The Chiefs have played Omarion Hampton, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, and those guys averaged 14 fantasy points. None of them reached 90 rushing yards. Like James Cook's in a pretty bad spot here, but because he gets all the running back carries inside the 5-yard line, could still score 2 touchdowns. So that's why you play the workhorses. But James Cook, the ceiling doesn't exist in this game. Chiefs are going to shut him down. 2 decisions, Daniels or Danny Dimes, and Rico Dowdle or Woody Marks. I'm going to pick Daniel Jones over Jaden Daniels. Daniels' first game back, not to mention it was a lower body injury, which, as we saw with Lamar Jackson, could limit his rushing in his first game back. And a terrible spot against the Seahawks defense that, as they've gotten healthier, still a top 5 and pressure rate the past couple of games before their bye. So wherever I don't have to start Jaden Daniels, if I have another strong option that is also a rushing quarterback like Drake May, Daniel Jones, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to take Daniel Jones. Again, Colts team total is so high. The Steelers are so bad on defense. It's pretty easy to just start Daniel Jones and your Colts players and forget about it. Same thing for Rico Dowdle, who the Packers' run defense has been bad. Let's see here. I know I have a note here somewhere. The Packers, still 10th in rushing success rate. The past couple of games, 2 of their last 3 games also, they allowed over 4.5 yards per carry. I think it's a pretty good matchup for Rico Dowdle against the Packers front 7. They get pressure, but they can't stop the run. Flex spot, Bam Knight or Darius Slayton. You take the touches. You just go Bam Knight. Again, like I said, I like Darius Slayton, but it's all relative, and it's not a relative question for Bam Knight since he's going to get all the carries inside the 10-yard line. He's going to get all the touches, and he's playing the worst defense possible. Yes, RJ Plus. As I mentioned at the top of the show, you should hold Rachaad White through the bye since we don't know anything about Bucky Irving's injury. Pick one, Chase Brown, Rico, or Travion Henderson. I would go Travion or Rico. I think I'd personally go Travion. I'll tell you, I think public sentiment, I think most people will go Chase Brown. I'm going to go Travion Henderson. And a better matchup with pass catching upside, understanding that Chase Brown's still in a committee. Chase Brown's safer. If you want to be safer, you should start Chase Brown. But like personally, what I would do in my teams, I would start Travion Henderson because I'm going for upside. Especially if Jake Browning's under center. I don't want any part of that. Gadsden or Bowers. You play Bowers. You trade Gadsden because unless it's tight in premium league, you're never starting a Rondé Gadsden over Brock Bowers. So you just you have to start Brock Bowers and you trade Rondé Gadsden. That easy. Stafford or Dart? I mean, it's easily Dart. Davey, come on. You know it's Jackson Dart. What else do you want from Jackson Dart? He's played the toughest schedule possible. He's played the Eagles twice, the Broncos, and still in his 4 full starts, he's the QB5 in points per game. What do you want from Jackson Dart? He doesn't belong in the same question as Stafford. Come on, guys. You know you can't get there as a pocket quarterback against Jackson Dart. Half PPR, flex 2, Gadsden, Tet, and we're not flexing Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. Okay, cool. So I would go Kraft and Gadsden over Tetaroa. What's happened also, as I talked about on last week's show, by the way, at the top, we discussed it after the Chargers game, but Keenan Allen's the loser in all this. Trey Harris now, since Quentin Johnston was injured, he's come back. He's seen 11%, 0% of the team's targets. Could be playing injured. We have no idea. But regardless of it, it's the fact that Trey Harris is their best blocking wide receiver, and they know that, which is why Trey Harris was in on the goal line whenever he caught that touchdown against the Vikings, because he's their blocking wide receiver. And he's sit the last 2 games since Quentin Johnston returned. Harris showed enough whenever QJ was out to stay on the field for a third of the role, 33% route rate. And Gadsden has showed us enough in this time to also be the team's slot receiver. And so what's happened is Gadsden is coming off a season high, 94% route rate. He's playing both out wide and the slot, and that's taking away from Keenan Allen's every down role. And obviously QJ, regardless if he's injured or not, he's losing targets to Ladd McConkey. So the way the target tree works out rest of season is Ladd McConkey, then Gadsden, then Keenan Allen, then QJ, then Trey Harris. Keenan Allen still has enough value where you can and should trade him. Quentin Johnston, you've seen his ceiling before injury, still also had a 23% target share before injury. And players like that, you just hold because you can't sell for pennies on the dollar. Like you're not selling Quentin Johnston after a 0% target share. You're not getting anything back. So you just stash him. You can't start him either, but you just hold him because you never want to give up a player that showed that kind of ceiling like he did in the first month of the season for nothing. So you just hold Quentin Johnston for now. Maybe a drop in a couple of weeks if it doesn't get better. But Gadsden's the real deal. Give Nico Collins, and I'm assuming you mean Aaron Rodgers, for James Cook and Cam Ward. Yes, that's fine. Aaron Rodgers is a better start weekly than Cam Ward. But James Cook is the best player, and we're looking for the best player here. So I'd rather have James Cook because the downgrade from Aaron Rodgers to Cam Ward is negligent. Monagai or Booty, not even close. It's Monagai. Would you trade J.K. Dobbins for Saquon Barkley? What? What kind of league is this, Vaughn? And can you invite me in this league next year? Of course. Of course you'd trade Dobbins for Saquon Barkley. Of course. Flex T or Tet. If it's Joe Flacco, I'm flexing T. Higgins. If it's Jake Browning, I'm flexing Tetaroa. Need 3 from Monagai, ETN, Warren, Bam, all the same guys everyone has questions about. Okay. So it's easily Monagai, Bam Knight, and Travis Etienne. There you go. Those are your 3. Is Hubbard a drop? Yes. Yeah. Monagai is a better 1-week starter than Hubbard. Hubbard's just a stash, and he's an elite stash, like we talked about with TreVeyon Henderson. I was never dropping TreVeyon Henderson because I understood he's an elite stash that could help us reach to this point. But Chuba Hubbard also now an elite stash if Rico Dowdle were injured, but you would never start Chuba Hubbard. So can you drop Hubbard? Absolutely. And you should drop him for Monangai if you need a starter. But I would not drop him for Blake Corum just because I think Hubbard is the better stash than Corum. So it just depends what you need and what your roster needs. Trade Swift and Daniel Jones for Bucky Irving. I mean, quarterbacks, I don't even know how to answer that question. You can, that's fine. But again, we don't know about Bucky Irving's status. We don't know if he's going to be back in week 10. No one knows because there has not been any update. In fact, the only update we have are bad updates that he keeps getting ruled out 7 days before kickoff. So we just don't know. That's why you should stash Rachaad White and Sean Tucker everywhere this week. Bam Knight or Chase Brown in full PPR. I'm starting Bam Knight. Easily Sutton over DK. You never start DK over Cortland Sutton. Need 3. From Monangai, ETN, yeah, it's all the same guys. Okay, so it's Monangai, we answer that. Monangai, ETN, and Bam Knight. I'm starting TreVeyon Henderson over Josh Downs for the touches. And although I love Downs, we also know he only plays in 3 wide receiver sets. So I'll take the touches for TreVeyon Henderson. Chris Olave or Rico Dowdle. I'm going to play Chris Olave one more time and cross my fingers it's not a downgrade. Daniel Jones or Drake May. I would start Drake May personally, but you can't win with that question. It's like the QB4 or the QB5. Both answers are right. I would personally start Drake May, but if you start Daniel Jones, it's not the wrong answer either. Packers or Seahawks defense this week. Definitely the Packers against the Panthers, just because it's still Bryce Young. We're going to use our brain. Jaylen Warren or Kareem Hunt. Definitely Kareem Hunt. We talked about the matchup earlier for Jaylen Warren, how it's a bad one. Trust May and Booty versus the Falcons D. You can trust May. Booty, the usage hasn't changed the past few games at all. It's just that the touchdowns have come. 4 touchdowns in 3 games now. But it's still the same, not team high target share. He consistently every single week has been top 2 in routes run. He just happens to now be scoring touchdowns. That's it. And I talked about Drake May's matchup earlier. You can rewind to the top of the show. I love the Patriots offense and Drake May this week. So Bootie's like less of a trust because it has to be a long touchdown for him to score. All of his touchdowns have come from outside the red zone. That's not a sticky stat. Like that's not sustainable week to week because all that is the long touchdowns, and we can't predict long touchdowns since red zone, end zone usage is easier to predict. But I like May regardless. S-Dar says he's starting Jaden Daniels over Daniel Jones everywhere, and he can. It's the world and the country has free will. I'm starting Daniel Jones over Jaden Daniels everywhere, understanding that quarterbacks coming back from soft tissue, lower body injuries don't run as much, and it's a bad matchup. Not a good matchup for Jaden Daniels either, whereas it's the perfect matchup for a running quarterback like Daniel Jones. But again, we all have free will. Do what makes you happy. And finally, this last question, because they're all the same questions. Everyone's wanting to know. Kyle Monangai or this, Monangai or that. Like it's Monangai. That's most of the time your answer is Monangai. But Monangai or TreVeyon Henderson, again, just ask yourself, what is more predictable? Like what is easier to project? And without Roschon Johnson, without DeAndre Swift, we can easily project Monangai. Whereas even without Ramondre Stevenson, although I love TreVeyon Henderson, and I'm going to start him in a lot of places, you can't project as easily for him because there's a wider range of outcomes. So don't beat yourself up. Keep it easy on yourself. Don't make life any harder than it has to be. And go with the more projectable player and Monangai over TreVeyon Henderson. With that being said, that is the Week 5 Monangai start sit essay here at Yahoo. Again, I'm John Daigle from Establish the Run. at Not J Daigle on Twitter, where you can also ask those start sit questions. And I'm not on Twitter a lot, but when I get on, I might answer if I see your question in time. I don't like living online. Seems like a very unhealthy thing to do. And with that being said, good luck this week. And remember, go Monagai and be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you next time.